Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the sofa.
Hello there, Kat. Thank you for having me.
Unfortunately, we're not here for fun today. We're not here for a quiz or
What?
anything. It's something quite serious I want to talk about, and it's something I'm not sure on, so I need your opinions.
Okay.
How do you feel about remakes of video games? So, not talk about remasters where they just kind of upscale the graphics, but it just feels like there's been a recent surge of video games that have been remakes, and I don't know how I feel about them.
I think there has been a massive upturn in remakes, probably since the 2010s have been pretty full of them. And I think half of me thinks cynically it's a little bit of a cash grab coming in on all the
Mm,
nostalgia. But then the other side of me thinks actually, if it's done well and you're getting a game that you loved as a kid for a cut price, and then kids nowadays who didn't experience it get to play it as well, then surely that can only be a good thing.
yeah, that's why I'm so conflicted because it also feels like there might be, doing these remakes rather than kind of creating new IPs, creating new ideas and material. So let's break it down a bit more. So you mentioned kind of nostalgia and that there have been so many recently. Have there been any recent releases that you've kind of particularly enjoyed or?
So probably the most recent remake that I have played is Crash Bandicoot, the
Hmm.
Insane Trilogy. I also played Spyro,
Hmm.
but I didn't play that as a kid, so it doesn't quite have the same effect as the Crash Bandicoot games. And I loved them. I
Hmm.
really loved them. Like, they look beautiful. They feel the same as they did when I was a kid, which
Yeah,
I
it's
think is
kind of like
really
what the
important.
it's the graphics that you imagined they were as a kid. So I was a huge Spyro fan, and that actually bits through the remake. But yeah, and it was like, oh, this feels like what I thought it was when I was younger.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because when I played Uncharted 4, and in Uncharted 4 you play a level on the original Crash Bandicoot, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, what is this?" Because it was all directional pad and
Mhm.
everything. So I think they've done a really really good job there, and I think this is where the remakes really split the fandoms, because you can have a game like Crash Bandicoot where really they haven't changed that much. The identity is still very much Crash Bandicoot as it was.
Mhm.
Whereas you've got something like Resident Evil 2 or Final Fantasy 7 where they've completely changed it and overhauled it. And some people will say that's for the better. It's more modern, it's more in keeping with what people like now. But then other people will say it's not the same game that I loved when I was young. What do you think?
I mean, Final Fantasy VII for sure is not the same game. It's only a fraction of it, and a lot more of the story has for other characters been built upon. But obviously, it stops after the Midgar section. So that is kind of a bit of an oddball example because, and it feels like there's going to be some changes in the storyline with that as well. But
Do you
then again,
like that though? Do you like that they have made a remake of a game and are possibly going to change the story? I didn't play the original Final Fantasy VII, so for me it wouldn't make too much of a difference. But if you were a fan, would you like that because it's something new, or would you not like it because this isn't the game that you loved and enjoyed?
so Final Fantasy VII wasn't part of my childhood, so I've seen it being played, and yeah, it's beautiful mostly, and the combat style and so on. It is introducing new people to kind of later Final Fantasy. So they played it when they were a kid, didn't play kind of the more recent ones, and are now looking to get back into the franchise, which is really good. But yeah, it's kind of is if something's sacred to someone's childhood, does it devalue it when it changes later? I mean, you could argue that about Hollywood and the way that there's all these debates about all these remakes of Star Wars and adding CGI aliens in places and so on. So, and that's another theme that I've kind of found is it feels like the video games industry is now at a stage where it's starting to echo the movie industry. Because this whole idea of kind of rebooting and remaking films and franchises it's something that's been done a lot in Hollywood. So it goes without saying in kind of the superhero films, if how many more times we need to see, Uncle Ben die in the Spider-Man films. We're kind of a little bit over that now. It's going to happen. And a lot of films people are surprised about. So there's been several versions of A Star Is Born. So obviously it came up recently with Lady Gaga in, but there's two older versions of that. Three older versions of that movie, and there's been several films about the Titanic, maybe about five or six.
But then I put it to you, I certainly couldn't name a Titanic film prior to the 1997 classic, and I couldn't tell you another Star is Born film. Could you tell me anything about those films without having looked it up?
No, I mean,
Or
well,
is the most recent one the best one and therefore the most famous one?
the most recent one for previously for Star is Born was 1976. Before that, it was 54, and then before that, 37. So it wasn't part of my childhood. It's just almost like the industry is kind of growing up a bit more and starting to echo how Hollywood became, and the movie industry generally, not necessarily just Hollywood movies, but it's kind of 50 years or so behind that industry, and it's just now doing the same things that movies have done.
But then when you look at how quickly technology has advanced since those games, so Crash Bandicoot the first one came out in 96, I think, similar time for Final Fantasy, how much we've moved on in that time. Same with the superhero films. So you had a film 50 years ago, it would look completely different. The animations and the everything in it would look completely different. To our modern audience eyes, it would look a bit rubbish.
Hmm. Yeah, I
But
mean,
then
but
to
then
the older audiences, they are that is the classic, and they are the best films.
yeah, I mean, we also had the technology leaps, even from involving sound, even to involving color, and I mean, obviously
Hmm.
the CGI and all that, and quality of cameras and techniques improved. But is it the older ones that are better? Potentially not. It's a lot of it is not nostalgia. So a lot of these games that are kind of being remade are you know, games that millennials grew up on, and now they're people with money. They're people in steady jobs creating kids of their own. So it just feels like a clear cash grab to be able to get that money again.
You say that, but then think of Crash Bandicoot. I wouldn't have played Crash Bandicoot or probably even really thought about it. And then it came out and I was back on it again. And then my sister, who is younger than me, didn't play Crash Bandicoot as a kid and had no experience of it. And yet when it came out, she played it and she was obsessed with it. She absolutely loved it. So is it a cash grab or is it a way for us to experience it again when we might not be able to, and also a newer, younger audience to also engage with it?
Yeah, I mean, another example of this is the Pokemon series. So the original Reds, Blues, Greens were kind of out in the kind of mid to late 90s, so like kind of 96 for the UK. We then had the remake, the Fire Red and Leaf Green series, which was 2004, which is one that I personally have more memories of because I didn't play the original games. But then the 2018 releases of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, they were pretty much the same game, so focus on the Kanto region, but a very changed game style, much more simplified, much more stripped down. And you could just see that that was just made for when parents had played Pokemon when they were younger. It was a game to get their kids into Pokemon and to enjoy that. Is that a bad thing? No, it's not. It's still gaming and so on. But was that game created at the expense of more innovations in the Pokemon franchise? 2019's Pokemon Sword and Shield, there was a whole controversy that all of the Pokemon weren't going to be brought into the Pokedex from previous franchises, and our company is focused on this kind of thing at the detriment of new material. Hard to say. Is it harder to create and innovate if they don't have guaranteed revenue because they know that these remasters do well? Hard to say.
I think in terms of that, I think you're looking more at the publishers for that. I mean, are the publishers willing to take risks on a new idea when they could throw out a battle royale that you know is going to make you millions, and or a remake that you know is going to make you more or less guaranteed money? But you can see from a business perspective, you're going to follow the money really, which I think it is detrimental to gamers because we don't get these new and exciting things, which is why I think the indie market is really booming at the minute, because that's the
Mm,
place where you're seeing the most risk. People are
absolutely.
taking chances because they're not controlled by the publishers, and I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Mm. I mean, something that's kind of, I think it might, potentially be phased out as we're kind of moving towards this kind of very next gen of consoles, is kind of the idea of kind of backwards compatibility and not being able to hold on to things.
Hmm.
So I am a collector of older games. I have quite a large amount of them. So if there is a game I want to play, I can go and play it because I do have everything. But opening up things through remakes and remasters, it means it doesn't become expired. It means that you can still continue to play. Now that may
Hmm.
change as we move much more into the digital products rather than physical products. But there's no way a Super Nintendo cartridge is going to fit into a Wii. But then with kind of game updates and remakes, that still keeps that game alive for people.
Exactly, exactly. So people can still enjoy it even now, which is great, which is what we want everybody to do. But I think you're right. It is the market at the moment is shooters, big sandboxy Assassin's Creeds, and remasters. Especially at the moment, it's a big trend, and I can only see it continuing.
Yeah, I mean, recently I'm just trying to think of other games that have kind of come out in the last kind of 3 years. So there's all the whole Resident Evils are on the way. We had the Spyro and Crashes. We've got Tony Hawk coming out in the next few months as well. There was the whole Shadow of Colossus came back. Link's Awakening, which was only on Game Boy, but that was a very, very different game in how it looked and felt in the end. Even Doom, no, that's kind of more of a reboot. I'd say that was kind of very different. Not all of these are successful. I think it's fair to say that not all of these remasters are completely risk free. So you mentioned indies, and the one way of doing that is via Kickstarter. A group of game developers wanted to receive king for Leisure Suit Larry. I mean, we weren't the target market
Oh
when the originals came out.
no.
But basically it's about kind of a sleazy guy, and he wants to use
Yeah,
his
sleazy dude
virginity, and it's
in a white
very,
suit.
yeah, it's very dated, very a product of, it's one of those things that it should have a disclaimer at the beginning saying this is a product of the time and not a reflection of decent values. But that did still make it through and was funded on Kickstarter and was not very good. So it's not completely risk free. We did mention Tony Hawk, and there was the Tony Hawk Pro Skater HD that came out a number of years ago that was got very not great reviews from critics there. So I say hopefully they're looking to do something different with Tony Hawk 1 and 2 when that comes out.
We can kind of see it from both sides. It's difficult to say
Yeah,
that
definitely.
everything is a cash grab because I don't think it is. I think people are genuinely when they remake something if it's done well. If it's done badly, then obviously it's a load of rubbish, and that is
Yeah.
cynical. You are just after the money. But if it's done well,
Yeah, I mean, with Final Fantasy VII,
benefits to it.
part of the remake or part of the making of the game again was the writers wanted to be able to explore the backstories of certain characters more. They wanted to be able to explore this, but the fact that it's not the complete game, the fact that it's not what people bought as one singular price point game, one singular 4 disc epic all those years ago, and they're not able to get through to the end, very
How much did the
conflicting.
remake retail at?
Yeah, so it was released
Essentially,
as at a full price game. So a lot of the other remasters, so like Spyro, like Crash, were brought out at a lower price point, but no, Final Fantasy VII was brought out at the full price point.
see that doesn't sit very well with me at all. If you're only paying for half a game,
Now,
because
is
you're
it
going to end
half a
up
game?
paying because you're going to end up in the end you're going to what you probably would have paid 60 quid for back then. You wouldn't have done obviously, but say you paid for a full game back then, you've now got to pay double that to finish the game that you liked.
To get the same amount of story. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
a full game in terms of hours of play. So there's kind of almost been a trend recently. I mean, I'm just thinking of Assassin's Creed Odyssey now, where it's almost like make the game as massive as possible. Red Dead Redemption 2, make the game as big as you possibly can. But if you are still getting, £1 an hour out of your game, is that bad value for money and entertainment? Probably not.
For me, if I were a Final Fantasy VII fan and I'd paid full price for that game, I would be very annoyed if the story wasn't finished and instead they fluffed it out with side quests and stuff.
Yeah,
That's not what
I
I would
believe it's
want.
not fluff. I believe it is very well written, very well detailed, very interesting quest. It's not kind of your Assassin's Creed style. Oh, catch the balloons, original Assassin's Creed style. Very basic fetch
It
quest.
still doesn't sit well with me. I think if I'm paying full price for a game, I expect the story to be finished.
I mean, my early question that I asked when I first learned about this is it going to be kind of episodic releases, and kind of you'll download another chapter in a few months time and another chapter is kind of free DLC or something? No, absolutely not. You've got to pay again. So
Yeah, see, I'm not sure about that myself.
I mean, I think we can probably conclude this with if it was a game we played when we were kids, I'm delighted to play it again for the nostalgia. If it's a game we didn't play when we were a kid, then it's a cash grab.
I was just going to ask you that. So, has Final Fantasy VII looking as nice as it does? You never played the original. I didn't play the
Mm-mm.
original. Does it make you want to play this version of it?
I'm glad that I've seen it, but I don't think it's something I would get on with in terms of
Okay.
how it's played.
But then, if I were to offer you SSX3 as a remake on a plate,
Well, then I would be making grabby, grabby hands, going, ooh, ooh, me, mine. I can only hope that SSX3 receives the same amount of love that Tony Hawk is receiving at the moment. But I still will feel very cynical. But then again, there has been such a gap in the market for snowboarding games. There was Steep, which I really did enjoy, but didn't quite encapsulate it as well. It's still a risky genre.
to summarize my feelings about it, I would much rather have a remake of any kind, really, as long as it's done well, over another battle royale.
I think we could safely say that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm now you've now got me thinking of other games that I missed the boat on. So, when you kind of, I found out about a franchise, but it was already on an older console or something.
Hmm.
The obvious one for me there is Morrowind, because I never played Morrowind. I would got into the series later, and going back to those kind of graphics would be difficult. I don't think we've really concluded anything. So, what do you guys think about remakes and remasters? Are any that you think were particularly good, particularly bad, particularly tragic, or anything that you would definitely want to come back? Let us know. That's all from us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.